Coming up, roses are red, violets are blue, and the Brooklyn Nets stink. We break down the historic loss coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms, and that matters, especially after a loss like this. Doug, we're the Brooklyn Nets on the second game of a back-to-back against Boston, 119-68. They lost, by the way, setting the second worst margin of defeat in franchise history. How you doing, buddy?
I blacked out. What happened? What did I miss? Do we miss a basketball game?
Day. I was getting wine and roses for my lady, and then this kind of just ruined it.
136-86. I mean, just a near all-time loss, pretty much an all-time loss for the Nets tonight.
Sorry, I misquoted that number, by the way. The box score froze on me. Thankfully, it didn't look nearly as bad.
Yeah, it broke. It was like we gave up. They gave up trying to tally how bad the box score folks gave up trying to tally how bad the Nets were losing this game. They ultimately, we can lend some context to this game. When I say all-time loss, I mean, we're trending in that direction here. It's second worst loss in Nets history, fourth worst loss in the NBA this season. Tied for fourth for the biggest margin of loss in the NBA this season. Was trending toward lowest point total for a team in the game this season. Ended up coming in tied for fifth on that one. So just all around, really any way you want to slice this thing, this was, as long as we've been doing the podcast, and probably for most Nets fans out there, this was about as bad. And look, it's the second worst loss in history. Like, this is as bad as it's ever going to get in terms of how bad you lose a game. It was over from the tip, and they never look back. There's no X's and O's to break down from this standpoint, except to say, like, start taking it higher. I mean, we could do a little X's and O's, but, higher look at like sort of what's happening with this organization. But on a base level for this game, this is literally as bad as it gets when it comes to NBA losses.
Fun fact, Doug, 2022-2023 season, February 1st, 2023, Boston Celtics 139, Brooklyn Nets 96, a 43-point margin of defeat there. That marked the sixth worst loss in franchise history.
Could you imagine? That's like that's positively a barn burner compared to what we got.
Right there.
Compared to what
nail.
I would give anything for a 46-point loss coming in tonight. Now they had to go up and lose by 50. Losers.
If I recall correctly, watching that game in real time, I thought nail biter. That was my takeaway back then. This was also sandwiched in between, as you say, two games. But just to be clear, the worst loss in franchise history, 1978-79 against the Houston Rockets, a 52-point margin, 139-87. I'm noticing a trend here. I like to be in the 130s when you're going to get absolutely blown out. To your point, there's nothing to break down inside of this game. There was no Ben Simmons. You got back Cam Johnson, blah, 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 right? Who played in this game means absolutely nothing. What is startling is coming out of the game just one night prior, where, yes, they were down 15 to 20 points throughout, but they put together a run. I happened to connect with John Corrales from Locked On Celtics earlier today, where he said it was funny because he listens, of course, to the Locked On Nets podcast, and he was surprised because he looked at it as the Nets really made a push late in that game. Like, he put it more on the Nets succeeding, not the Celtics taking their foot off the gas. So there's all these things to say. That's exactly what we thought. Did we think the Nets were going to win either one of these games? No. But the type of effort and the ability to come back in a game and make it interesting late is all we really set our expectations at. There was not a single second from the moment this ball got tipped off that you thought the Brooklyn Nets were going to have any part of this contest.
No, like the effort was really low. You have to look straight at the coach when the effort is this low, right? Like, there's nowhere else. I mean, really everybody, but this has to land squarely on Vaughn's back to just get blown out this bad. I know they're without Simmons for this game. That's they've kind of shown that they need him at times, but they've been able to win games without him. They had really no answers early on for what Boston was trying to run. Boston was running one. They were targeting like Cam. I don't even want to blame him, really. They were targeting him on offense. They were kind of running this, like, I would call it like a Spain pick and roll at times, where like screen the screener action that was getting them downhill to the rim. with this is why Tatum had a bunch of assists in the game to Porzingis, because they would run like screening actions sort of at the nail, and then the Nets were just very confused about like what was happening. They didn't really know how to switch that action. So like they weren't forcing the Nets to switch on the on ball screens, but rather like these off ball screens. And the Nets just kind of couldn't figure out what was going on with these. And it didn't happen every single time, but it happened enough. And then when they weren't running those actions, they were just getting guys onto like just some sort of positive matchups sort of across the board. And that was on offense. And then on defense, that was on defense. And then on offense, the Nets, I mean, it was so apparent that the Nets offense had like literally no juice here.
Yeah.
And this is what happens when you face Drew Holiday, Derek White, Tatum there, Porzingis, who can clean a lot of this up, but he really didn't even need to. When the Nets play a team like this that has good point of attack, they have so much trouble. Like they can't, because really Bridges can't beat a defender. Cam really couldn't beat a defender. And if they can't do that, like the Nets offense will just grind down to a halt. So between those two things on the offensive and defensive end, if we're going to get a little X's and O's on this, I mean, that's the beginning of why you dig a hole. And then you combine that with just basically giving up. and you're
and a little
and
dash of just giving up.
I mean, they did. They gave up.
100%.
Like
No,
100%. They gave up. Like nothing was working, and then they just decided nothing's going to work. Right? Like there was no adjustments, there was no energy, nothing. I know it went long there, but like that's just kind of like how I see the game on a high level.
No, of course. And by the way, everybody knows the Celtics are an incredible team, right? They have double the number of wins this season that the Brooklyn Nets do. Like it's understood. The Nets are outmatched in this game. But you mentioned that part on the offensive end. Nobody, and I mean nobody, Cam Thomas included, could take their man off the dribble and find space for themselves, get into the paint, create a little bit of motion, force the defense to collapse a little. And when you start to look at it like that, again, then you're thinking about Nicholas Claxton. Well, okay, so Porzingis will just kind of sag in the paint. You decide. There was a possession early in this game where Nicholas Claxton dribbled around for the entire shot clock. And on the one hand, you'd say it's like a Ben Simmons kind of thing. Hey, turn and just attack at the basket, try to get fouled. That's how the possession ended, and he misses the layup trying to go up Porzingis. But everything in between there, you're watching the guys off ball. Not a single one of them talk about on ball taking on a defender. They couldn't get away from their defenders just to give Nick Claxton someone to pass it to. And again, Boston is incredible, but this was, in contrast to the game prior, just so startling and also crystallizing. This is what happens after losses like this. You get, at least I do, I get pretty fired up and start getting pretty negative. But it was so glaring, the deficiencies that we know this team has had. But then on top of it, the inability to do anything different. There was no adjustment to be made. There was no, and I want to get into the second with Jacques Vaughn, no change in terms of trying something different schematically or otherwise. It was just a mess. It was a mess from the start. You mentioned the team just basically giving up on it, and that's the next thing that I want to get to here. Jacques Vaughn and his decision-making process, when we look at how long any of these starters played in this game, at what point do you need to send a clear message, even if it seems like the players are no longer necessarily listening? We'll get into that coming up here in just 1 second.
All right. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood is the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this. Now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right. No cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep a Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer.
All right, so as we continue, we're going to still call it a post game, even if the Nets didn't play a full 48 or maybe even a full 8 seconds of this one. We do remind you, you get over to wegotnets.com and you can sign up with your email for a free ebook. Hey, guess what? 5 stories in 5 days. And as Doug has said before, people are clamoring for more. Maybe we'll tell the story of this one, the all-time historic loss in Boston for
We
the
were there for it.
Brooklyn Nets. We could tell you a tale. You can also, by the way, fill out a form, ask us questions. What stories do you want to hear about? Maybe you send a message that says, don't tell me about this loss for the Brooklyn Nets. We never want to hear about it again. WeGotNets.com. Sign up for your free ebook today. Okay, so I do want to get to the Jock Vaughn piece of this, but that in some ways does feel like territory we've walked down multiple times across this season. Let's just live in the fact that the trade deadline just passed. Does a game like this and a loss like this and the coach performance and the player performance, is there any world where you think that this should rein up the chain of command to maybe we made a massive error in judgment at the deadline? We already understand they lost a lot of games, but in my mind, I don't put the Nets in the same category as the Wizards or the Hornets, but those are the kind of teams that lose these kind of games by these types of margins.
Yeah, the teams that have lost by these margins, by the way, the biggest loss of the year is 62. OKC beat the Blazers. Sixers beat the Hornets by 53. Celtics beat the Pacers. I mean, so the Pacers are in there. They lost by 51. Mavericks beat Utah by 50. Those are like the 50-plus game losses. And then you got like a Wizards, Pelicans, Lakers. I mean, there's some okay teams that fall into this range. So it can happen. Sure. It doesn't look good. It's easier to do it if you're a bad team, for sure. And just real quick, before we get into that last piece, I just want to highlight 2 other stats that I just think stood out. One is just highlighting what we were talking about before about like the Nets not being able to beat anybody on offense. The Celtics starters had 1 block. 1 block. The Nets couldn't score at all. No block shots. It was just a testament that they just couldn't beat anybody, right? They couldn't beat anybody in the perimeter at all. And then the final tally at the end of this game, net starters 29, Peyton Pritchard 28. That was how the score.
By the way, starters, Dorian Finney-Smith led all starters, and at one point he finished the game -10. That led all starters, 4 points, almost impressive. And he was leading the team as a -10, having not scored at all at one point in this game. Just impressive things from all throughout the starting year.
Bridges led all net starters with 10 points, and then it was Claxton 6, Cam 4, Schroeder 4, DFS 4. It's just terrible. So anyway, like not to harp too long on it, but I did want to highlight those 2 things. It's like, oh, maybe they're just getting stuffed at the rim. No, that was that. It wasn't even that was happening. It was just like terrible shots. Thought they were getting fouled, kind of. Maybe were a little bit. Wouldn't have really mattered. So overall, so your question before was about like, look in the mirror time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to, right? Like I can't. You can't lose by these 2 games in a row, and think like, 1, you're going to make like a push to the end of the season, and maybe they're just okay with it, and 2.
That they're 1 star away.
Oh, yes, I was joking before. I was like, oh, they look like a team that's just 1 guy away. I mean, like, but we've struggled with this at times during the season. Now, one thing to always remember with losses like this is you're never as bad as your worst loss. You're never as good as your best win. Like that's usually a good, just like a good grounding effect to like sort of have on analysis. 2 is the worst time usually to do macro thinking about your team is following a loss like this, because it's so difficult to see a scenario where they ever win again. The Nets are going to win like a bunch more games. Like I'm very, very confident in that. We went through their schedule the other day. We broke down. We kind of had tallied these as losses already, right? Just based on like when we went through sort of what they needed to have done for the rest of the year, we put these as like sort of definitive losses. Now, that doesn't make it better, but it also doesn't mean they're going to lose every game from here on out. So I don't think we see grand sweeping changes from this. It is a reminder, though, that this iteration of the team is like far away from like contention or high level seeding. And I think like that's not really a take ground in a 50-point loss. I think this is just a soft, well, maybe harsh reminder that that's probably the case.
Yeah, I think a game like this, to your point, and you went 7-20, but you talk about injuries and all these different things. But it's if you were selling yourself as a fan on the idea, well, wait until this offseason after the deadline passes and there's some rumblings they're going to go get player X or player Y. Okay, but no, wait until the offseason. if we're following the pattern here for this organization from Joe Tsai to Sean Marks and down the chain of command, then I wouldn't assume that it's this offseason. I wouldn't assume it's the next trade deadline. I might not assume it's the next offseason after that. And sometimes games like these and runs like this can clarify for yourself. Even if you like players on an individual level, the collective result is not going to be there more often than not.
I mean, the only guy they were missing tonight was Ben Simmons. Everyone else is healthy. Like, this team's fully healthy.
The guy that really doesn't score a lot, it looks like represents about 50
Okay, and guess what?
targets.
Fine, they were missing Ben Simmons. Yeah. Celtics didn't have Jaylen Brown.
I know,
right? Like, that's their third best player. And so, like, I mean, I know some people would be like, "Oh, Derek White, whatever." It's like he's a great player, right? Yeah. So they're missing a great player, someone who's much better than Simmons at this point right now, right? Is a better player than Ben Simmons for sure. And so the Celtics weren't even a full team. So this is like a relatively healthy Nets team. Yeah, Cam Johnson coming back from injury, Dorian Finney-Smith still on a minutes limit, right? Okay, so little problems, but this is like a relatively healthy team. Now, again, no one thinks that, and we're going to talk about this next episode, but like no one thinks that this version of the Nets is the ultimate version of the Nets. Like Sean Marks would say as much too, but it hammers home the idea that on a talent level, like they're far away. They're far away from these teams. Like they just are. I mean, stack these guys up against.
Celtics are going to compete to go to the finals and maybe win a championship this year, right? And if that's
who on the Nets would start for the Celtics right now?
Oh no,
start. I mean, probably.
Maybe.
Is it like for sure? I don't know.
I was gonna say maybe, right?
I mean, he would. He would start over Derek White, I guess. But like the fact that you even have to stop and think about it, and maybe we like look like a clown for even questioning it. Like I'm sure he would start, but like after that, no one else is even close to starting for that Celtics team. Now, that's the best team of basketball right now. So maybe that's not a totally fair comparison, but it is a fair comparison when you are seeing yourself as like a 2 to 3 years, 2 seasons away from contending with these teams. Then it is a fair comparison, because if you can't put multiple guys in your current team into another really good team starting lineup, then you're just like, use that as a litmus test for where you are. Yeah. Like, just look across the court and decide where you are. Bridges starts. Okay, fine. Like that's, and that they might even talk about. I don't know. Like, right. and so it just I think it really brings home with stunning clarity that when you asked at the beginning of this, did the Nets make a misstep at the trade deadline? Maybe, possibly, probably, right? That could be where we are.
Yeah, and listen, and now that you can do simple ones like Dorian Finney-Smith, right, and whatever that looks like, or at the highest level possible, Mikal Bridges, and then you project out over the next couple of seasons and say, well, when is his value going to get any higher than this? Maybe it does and it all works out, but historically, underneath Sean Marks, we've actually seen trade values only diminish, and then them ended up taking less than what they at one point at least were speculated were able to get for these guys. So it does feel weird. And then again, the last point here before we move into, I want to get into Jacque Vaughn and what he can control in a game like this and what he failed, I think, to do. But the other part of this too is games like this crystallize that whatever runway you're on, Mikal Bridges might not be a part of the end destination in terms of his age and his timeline and his contract. So it's a rough one. We obviously will turn the page away from this loss, but coming up here in a second, did Jacque Vaughn fail to take an opportunity to send a message to all of his starters in this game by letting them play well into the third and even the fourth quarter? We dive in on that coming up in just 1 second.
All right, before we get to that, make myself feel better here. Talk about our friends over at Hungry Root. Look, when it comes to grocery shopping, there's a couple things you want to check off. You want to make sure you're saving time. You want to make sure you're saving money. You want to make sure you're reducing waste, and you want to make sure that you're getting good, healthy stuff to be able to fill that basket. This is where Hungry Root comes in. It's your partner in healthy living. It's the easiest way to get fresh, high-quality groceries, simple, healthy recipes delivered right to your door. You save money, you save time, and you get healthier with Hungry Root. All you do over at Hungry Root, you take a little short quiz. They're going to get to know your personal health goals, what kind of foods you like, even what kind of kitchen appliances you like to use. And they're going to build a personalized cart with all your grocery needs for the week and give you the delicious recipes and recommendations to put those groceries to good use. That's the full stack, baby. You're getting everything delivered right to your door. Make sure it's healthy. Make sure you're saving money. Right now, Hungry Root is offering Locked On Nets listeners 40% off your first delivery and free veggies for life. Go to hungryroot.com/locked on. Grab 40% off your first delivery. Get those free veggies. That's hungryroot.com. Don't forget to use that link. Oh, excuse me, hungryroot.com/locked-on. Don't forget to use that link so they know we sent you. hungryroot.com/locked-on.
All right. So as we tie a bow on the post-game podcast, as Doug and I said coming into it, we predicted these would be losses. Did we think that this would be at the level of a 136-86 historic second worst in franchise history loss? No, probably not. And at the top, we talk about how everyone's to blame and accountability. And listen, I'm not going to sit here and, Mikal Bridges wants to play every game. Good for him. That's fantastic. When I go inside this box score and I see that Mikal Bridges played 26 minutes, I don't know what we're doing. And I'm going to ask it on two levels. The first one is when you don't see effort. Now, whether or not coaching, could Jacques Vaughn be a better coach? Sure. But when you see that these guys are giving absolutely zero, I pull every single one. I play all the young guys like Trendon Watford and Jalen Wilson and anybody else that you can pull off the bench. Bates Diop, they all go in. They all play 30 minutes. They all carry out the rest of this thing. You just say, listen, you guys got to sit down and take a look in the mirror. Now, again, I understand that Jacques Vaughn may not be the best coach, but in a game like this, when it starts out like that, it does feel like there is some loss between whatever message he's preaching in the locker room and the way that the players come out. Because the one thing that you don't need to coach or shouldn't need to coach is effort. And we said this now a few times over the past few weeks, that there have been games when it looks like the players are mostly checked out of giving everything they could in these ones. And Cam Thomas, not to single him out, but he was an example of this. He came out of the last game saying, yeah, it feels like I'd gotten to a level in the NBA that I'm not getting calls from the refs. It's frustrating. He kind of came out and looked like he wanted to make a point. I'll throw my body into you. I'm not getting the calls. And everybody was doing this on the team. So I'm not singling him out alone. Mikal Bridges didn't look terribly interested in this game either.
Yeah, like they all argue with the ref. I think that you do have to put the square on the coaching. They were completely unprepared for the scheme. It was like it was almost kind of like they didn't even know Porzingis was playing, like because he didn't play last night, which is like, well, really, I mean, they clearly knew. They clearly knew, but there was like no plan to really and it was like, I don't know if they tried to Tatum scorched them last night. And so they maybe were a little dialed in on making sure that didn't happen again. But then that's why Tatum had a bunch of assists. Like I said, they ran totally different actions than they ran last night because they had different personnel, and Porzingis gives them just sort of like a totally new element. Yeah, I think that goes squarely on the coach. I don't see how it can't. And if you can't get the guys motivated to play, then that's like half the battle, right? Is trying to get these guys dialed up. It's a back-to-back. It's going to be a tough loss. Hey, they made a second half run yesterday, like you said, weren't able to sort of capitalize on that momentum at all. And with a mostly healthy team, I mean, should be a team that comes out going into the All-Star break, looking to really make hay on maybe possibly an upset. They're not going to have Jaylen Brown, right? You're getting a Jaylen Brown down the Sam Hauser reduction in talent. Yeah. That should help you. And to have none of it matter at all and to feel like they just didn't even know what the Celtics were going to be doing, that's all coaching to me. That's just all coaching. And I think we probably let Vaughn off the hook a ton at times this year, just because, I don't know, that just,
because we look at the talent level and we think that they're not good enough to beat a lot of the better teams, but it shouldn't, we probably have stopped short of saying, but you can be coached a lot better on a night-to-night basis, right?
Of course. There's plenty of other teams that have talent reductions that still go out and fight really hard every night and are trying to utilize sort of the personnel that they have in the moment in order to stay in games. I mean, example of this would be Memphis, right? If you look at Memphis has literally lost everybody, right? No Ja, no Marcus Smart, no Desmond Bane. And they've shifted the way they play to just have Jaren Jackson Jr. take a ton of shots. Now they're losing too, but they're in they've been in a lot of games, right? They're losing, but they are fighting with I mean, this is John Conchar and Vince Williams, and they're literally rotating a point guard every single night because they're sending the guys to the G League. Literally, it's Scottie Pippen one night goes to the G League on the 10-day. Jacob Gilliard goes to the G League. I mean, this is what's happening every single night for the team. I'm using them as an example to say that's a team that's down all their guys and are continuing to try to show new things because Taylor Jenkins is a good coach. The Nets have shown none of that this year, and they've except when Simmons plays, when they're just when he sort of pushes another identity just sort of on his own.
Mm-hmm.
Short of that, they've made zero changes. So that is a lot of coaching. And you can point to other examples throughout the NBA that have made more with less. even the teams that aren't very good.
No, I agree with you. And here's my other big thing that I guess maybe my final thought coming out of this one. Before, as you'll note, if you're watching on YouTube, we do have it listed there. Turn the page. It's All-Star break. You'll come out. We talk about games we think that the Nets can win. But the first guys, the ways to come off the bench was Cam Johnson, who came off the bench in this one. Shooter got the start. Then you also got Lonnie Walker and you got Dennis Smith Jr. Was mostly surprised by that because you're down Ben Simmons, so you're already size deficient in a matchup that you're already size deficient in, even when you have Ben Simmons. And then you don't see any Jalen Wilson. Now he ends up playing 19 minutes because of how much garbage time there was here, and Trendon Watford ends up playing 26 minutes because how much garbage time is here. I'm not going to point to Watford's 5 of 7 from the field and 15 points as any indicator of what could have been done. But Jalen Wilson didn't see the game, didn't see the court until midway through the second quarter. We just spent the last episode talking about how he's proven himself capable and deserving of getting rotational minutes. This is another one. And we have said this all year. Jock Vaughn's just complete blind spot for young players is gotten to an egregious level. And especially in a game like this, take advantage of every opportunity to develop young guys. How do I look at a box score where the Nets lost by 50 and Noah Clowney was there and got in for 8 minutes? It's impossible. And I don't want to hear that you don't want to expose some young guys. They're going to get beat. Of course, they're going to get beat up. Of course, it's going to be bad matchups, but you're going to play all the backups for the Celtics. It's NBA level reps. So I found that part as egregious as anything, that even inside of what the starters were or were not doing, the players that you utilized, I don't know if Trendon Watford can take on the assignment, but he's a bigger body. He's one of the biggest bodies you can put out there. So utilize them. So fundamentally, I disagreed with the rotations that Vaughn brought into this game.
This highlighted what we thought originally when we made the Jalen Wilson prediction about lack of minutes. It was this iteration of the team. It's Cam Johnson coming. Cam looked terrible. Right. And he didn't look still hurt, but he definitely looked like he hadn't played in a while. He couldn't do anything. It was start a drive, have it instantly shut off, turn around, pass. That was kind of it. That was kind of everybody. But the Jalen Wilson thing is this is exactly what when we were hey, we're not going to find minutes. It was hey, when these guys get back mostly healthy, it is going to be hard to find minutes on this team. And but the problem is that the veterans aren't going to look, that bouncy. Then you probably just need to make a change. These guys just didn't look like it was there. So look, a lot of problems here.
If your starters aren't going to be head and shoulders above your young players, then there's no reason that they shouldn't be sharing the court over the last 29 games now that they have remaining.
All right, look, we're going to stick around here on YouTube for a little bit. The rest of this will go up as Friday's podcast. So make sure you go back over onto the podcast feed we're going to go over sort of just as we go into the All-Star break, take a look at a high-level view of who is going to be around in 2 All-Star breaks for this Brooklyn Nets team, because I think when we start looking at it that way, you might see a lot of changes here happening. In the meantime, make sure you go to visit WeGotNets.com, grab that free ebook. YouTube folks, stick around here for a little bit. We'll jump in and grab some questions from you guys as well. Adam, take us out of here.
Life is the art of drawing without an eraser. That's John W. Gardner.
One of the all-time great poets. We'll be back tomorrow in a moment on YouTube talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. Yeah. Was that really basketball? Coming up, when we look ahead, coming out of the All-Star break for the Brooklyn Nets, 2026, who will emerge for the Brooklyn Nets core? Who will carry the torch forward of success for this organization? We ask the tough questions from Mikal Bridges to Cam Thomas and all the way up the chain of command to Joe Tsai, coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Marmot. We thank you as always for making us your first listen of the day. We're 100% free on all those great platforms. And Doug, as we said, live on YouTube, where, by the way, friends, we crested over that 6,700 mark. We are just pushing towards 6,800. Help us get there as well. We always appreciate everybody being on the live. And Doug, this was your thought. Big picture, pulled yourself way back and said, hey, 2026 All-Star break. What are we really talking about for the Brooklyn Nets?
Well, I posited this before actually the 50-point loss to the Celtics.
It was already
So
on your mind, but this
I
feels
was
like
on
it's
this was
cemented.
on my mind well ahead of the absolute drubbing that they got in Boston leading into the All-Star break. But I was sitting there thinking when I was supposed to be, parenting my kids and stuff, I was actually sitting there thinking around, what, like, I was trying to think about the plan and the idea that we understand that sports landscapes can change very quickly, right? Look only at the Brooklyn Nets to know this, right? Where they were 2 All-Star breaks ago looks, the chasm is wide as can be around like what the differences are between that team and this team now. So 2 years can really change basically everything for your organization. But I was also just thinking about it like on a high level too, thinking, and I basically just listed guys that are associated with the team in Brooklyn right now and was trying to think who of this group is going to be here in 2026. And that list was Joe Tsai. And I know what everyone's going to say is like, okay, well, he's the owner. I get it. Like I'm aware of what his role is in the organization. So the list was Joe Tsai, Sean Marks, Jacques Vaughn, Mikal Bridges, Cam Thomas, Ben Simmons, Nick Claxton. I was trying to just go in like sort of order of importance, I suppose, or like, tied to the organization, tried to look, I picked 2 years specifically for a couple different reasons. That's around Mikal Bridges, the end of Mikal Bridges' contract, right? Like they'll have made a decision on Ben Simmons at that point. Nick Claxton, they'll have made a decision on. Cam Thomas needs to be re-upped well in advance of that. So, and then you have like whether Joe Tsai is going to stick around for, years. Like if they get expansion money in the door and new TV deal in the door, is that like a good time to sell? I don't know. Right. Is Sean Marks still the GM at this point? Now seeing like this 4th iteration of this team, possibly. Is Jacques Vaughn the coach? I think I feel like there's almost for sure he's not. But, when you look at that list and you think 2 years from now, if you had to, I know I didn't actually even ask you this, but because I think we're going to talk about the team, but if you had to list it in order of confidence, like this is how confident I am, those people I just named, could you on the fly say to yourself, this is the order of confidence I feel 2 years from now, these guys will be walking into Barclays Center either as owner, GM, coach, or player?
Yeah, and fans are gonna love this. Okay, Joe Tsai, confident that he'll remain the owner. He's already kind of stamped it that he's willing to go in and out of superstar eras. Not gonna love this one. Sean Marks, probably the next one on the list. Why? Because he's already gone in and out of superstar eras, and they seem to be in lockstep. If I had to go next on that list,
it's hard, man. I'm telling you, right?
I think the first 2 were kind of easy, right? And I'll tell you right now, the guy at the bottom is Jacques Vaughn. I don't think that he makes it out. I don't think he makes it 2 years. And if you list Claxton, Bridges, and Ben Simmons there as well, there's a world, and this may sound odd, where Nicholas Claxton is the next likeliest player or guy on this list to still be a part of it, simply predicated on age. They re-up him. His contract runs longer. So maybe, Tsai, Marks, Claxton, and even ironically, maybe Simmons over Mikal Bridges, because that's predicated on value and trade, right? And the end of the contract. Yeah, man, it's really tough. I mean, I know no one's going to hold me to this, but the reality is, and I think maybe your point is, after Joe Tsai maybe alone, and then Sean Marks pretty high because of what we've seen, I don't think any of the players are really on this list with any level of security. I think it's more likely they're gone.
Yes, and so that exact sentiment. And so just a real quick note here. Adam and I, we were going to talk about each guy individually. I did not. I threw the curveball. I'd have to actually rank them here because I knew I don't know. I didn't want to. I'm not trying to catch you here, but watching you walk through the exercise there of ranking them is exactly that you did exactly what I was hoping you would do. Right? Because this is where you trust the podcast partner here.
Right.
Because I knew Adam and I think pretty similarly along some lines. And because I think pragmatically and logically about a lot of things, walking through that in a confident way gets really hard when you start thinking about the team on a macro level. Yep. When you start thinking about the team, because you can start to tell yourself a lot of stories here. Now, Tsai, I even threw Tsai in there because I'm not 100% confident he's the owner. I could just have him say, hey, look, Barclays never turned into the year-round arena that we wanted it to be with concerts and stuff. Like the WNBA thing isn't exactly like whatever he wants to do. Maybe
Mhm.
take losses on other things, and like it's a good time to get out. I'm throwing the expansion money, TV deal money, because there might be a world where it's like, hey, take that check and get out of here. I think there are worlds where like he could realistically like find reasons to sell. So I think that's realistic. Marks, I think like he might have one more shot at this. Like if a year from now, like kind of no one shakes loose, that might be it, right? Like you might have missed your window to say, hey, he sold you that you could rebuild this thing, and maybe these guys just don't come free, right? I think there's a very clear world where that doesn't happen. I agree with you that Vaughn is gone. I think he's probably fired at the end of the season. And then the players are hard because I think like Bridges, you're making a decision on. Bridges could ask for a trade. like I think there's a world where they go through another season of this or something like that, where these guys like they don't really improve. What's stopping him from asking for a trade?
Yeah, next trade
Claxton,
deadline, they're down. They're another 10 to 11 games under 500. What is he playing for?
Exactly. So I think when you start walking your way down sort of like this primrose path, like it looks very shaky on an organizational level around what could happen. And again, just to reiterate, I asked this before the loss. Like this really had nothing to do with the loss. Like they could have won tonight. I would have asked the exact same question. Because I really think when you start to break this down organizationally, I really feel like from the owner down to like the 12th guy, 14th guy on the bench, this is a shaky situation the Nets are in, where I do not feel confident 2 years from now that most of this list is here for a variety of different reasons.
Yeah, and you know what's funny, at the highest level with Joe Sile, just know when you talk about expansion money, and they always associate, well, buying into a sports franchise is a losing investment because you're always throwing more money into it. But they're not being honest.
That's what the owners tell you. These guys
exactly.
are
What they're being disingenuous about is that every single franchise, even the worst of them, always ends up being worth more. The Washington Commanders just got sold, one of the all-time dumpster fires of the NFL, and I don't even know what the number was. I just remember it's like, yep, there's a new record for what the evaluation of a sports franchise goes for. So on a year-to-year basis and cutting the checks, yeah, blah blah blah, the upkeep of an arena, but it is a really big noteworthy part of this, that if Josiah sees it as this was an investment, this has been a lot of fun, and here is a bigger check than what I wrote to get the team, I'm ready to move on from this. Then that really opens up, obviously, the floodgates for change from top to bottom. Coming up here in a second, I think it'd be interesting to look at Sean Marks and the way in which, for better or worse, 2 years from now, he could still be looked at the stabilizing GM force for this organization. I'll throw that curveball at Doug coming up here in just 1 second.
All right, our partners over at eBay Motors, they've teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd, best in the business, to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft, scouting the waiver wire every week, we're here to get you going with players guaranteed to fit on your roster. Take a look at some of the picks for this week heading into the All-Star break. Some of these guys are going to be relevant coming out of the All-Star break. First place you got to look over there is in Charlotte. Charlotte's really shook things up after the trade deadline. They got Trey Mann in the starting lineup tonight. 21 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 steals. I think he's going to stick here even with LaMelo Ball coming back. Trey Mann's just been able to pile it up across the stat line. He's got Cody Martin in there too. I think his minutes are pretty safe as well. Like Mann's upside a little bit more. Another guy to kind of lock into, whose minutes could stick around here if the big guys can't get straight. Bruno Fernando, center over in Atlanta, got the start leading into the All-Star break. 12 rebounds in 26 minutes. If you're going to run pick and roll with Trey Young, you're going to have some double-double upside in your range of outcomes. Go check out Bruno Fernando. You got Oscar Thompson starting there in Detroit too, another guy that maybe is still sitting out there on the waiver wire. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack bumpers, whatever your baby needs. eBay Motors has it with eBay Guaranteed Fit. It's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus these prices, you burn rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
All right, so as we continue the Locked On Nets podcast, we remind you guys, and actually now more than ever, you head over to wegotnets.com, you get the free ebook. That's 5 stories in 5 days, great moments throughout the Nets history, for better or for worse. But there's also a form there that you can fill out. I'd actually think this would be a great talking point. Go over there, reach out to us, and tell us, what is your hierarchy of who is here 2 years from now? Very curious to see how you put it. And let's say realistically, not optimistically, not wishful thinking, where do you realistically think the core of this franchise from ownership on down will be? Get over to wegotnets.com for your free ebook today. Okay, the question, the one thing that I want to pose here, and actually I did look this up just as a matter of fact. Right now, so Joe Tsai effectively, he bought the Brooklyn Nets for $3.3 billion, rolled into that. This was care of the of Nets Daily back in 2020, around $1 billion estimated for the money losing arena business. So that's the concert side and everything else, right? But that was 3.3, and they ended up rounding it down to kind of think about 3.2 from when Tsai reportedly bought it. Now valued at $3.98 billion. Now you may say, what is $0.7 billion, right? It's not a ton of money. I find that falling out of my car every single day. But even now, where the current state of this organization and franchise is, it still is ready to make money for Joe Tsai without expansions, without TV deals and new money coming in the door. If the Brooklyn Nets 2 years from now are ready to trade away Mikal Bridges because he requested, Ben Simmons is gone, do you think that Noah Clowney, Jalen Wilson, Dariq Whitehead, if he ever gets healthy, and a couple of draft classes, can you see a world where Sean Marks is still sitting there if Joe Tsai's not selling? He goes, look, the young core is here. Cam Thomas is there, right? Cam Thomas is here. Like, our young core is here. We're going to be exciting. Don't worry. We survived the rough patch. We traded on some of our veterans a little bit, and now we're ready to really build something sustainable. It kind of sounds like he's a snake oil salesman, but it seems like it's worked for him to this point.
Yeah, just not sure. I mean, almost for sure you're on your fourth coach by then too, right, through this regime. If you and that's fine. And right, but I mean that's a hard look in the mirror too, right? It's like Atkinson, Nash, Jacque Vaughn, and like I said, he's not fired, but it's really hard to imagine him playing this contract out. Like, right? I actually think that if they hadn't extended him so early, I think that we might have seen them move on from him already, right? But I
even want to ask you this question in the last episode. Sorry to jump in, but did you any world where we're beyond the point where the All-Star break? We said this about the deadline, where they are coming back from Paris. Is the All-Star break a time when you say we're making a switch at head coach for the rest of the season? Right? It's not going to happen.
They're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. We've been down this road before, but the reason I feel confident that they're not going to is, one, you would be putting the new coach in a disadvantageous situation because of the roster, right? It's going to be hard to like be really great with the roster. One, two, they would then be paying, because I'm pretty sure Nash is still on the books. So they'd be paying 3 coaches at the same time. That's a tough pill to swallow. And so I just don't think, like, for those, it's actually not even a pro Vaughn thing here. It's just like a anti-money piece. Yeah. Like, I just don't think they would want to put a new guy into the spot. You'd never be able to sell. There's not even like, there's like really good coaches sitting out there right now that are like for the taking. So I don't think that guy's even out there. And so even if you're going to promote from within, like Kevin Ollie, Ronnie Burrell, someone like that, they just aren't walking into a great situation either because of the nature of the team. So I just don't think, I think for those reasons, we see Vaughn sticking out the season. I know there's a certain contingent of fans that do not want that to be the case, but I just think that they're just not going to pay 3 coaches for this team. Yeah. Like, this is not the team you pay 3 coaches for, right? And so I just don't think that alone, I think, keeps his job. I think that I would just put that as the only reason, maybe.
So before we tap into some questions, because we appreciate everybody obviously sticking around for what is, these are longer conversations, so we don't get to respond to everybody on YouTube Live as much as we would like to. But then if that's the case, you named some players, Bridges, Claxton, Ben Simmons. I mean, are any of these guys here then? I mean, even the young players, right? Like, I mean, when you look at this roster, who would be here in 2 years? If it goes the wrong way and they don't go get a superstar, and you and I have already had this discussion, even if it's this offseason or the following year, going to get a superstar costs you not only draft capital, it costs you players as well. Is there a world where 2 years from now, Mikal is gone and so is Ben Simmons, but there's a new star, that there's a legitimate star that is now the new focal point for this team to carry forward with?
So if I had to bet like the number of guys that are still here with this group and I had to like definitively lay it down, I'd say like 2, I think, or something like that.
Right.
I just think there's too many other reasons for these guys. And if you even look at Mikal Bridges' post-game comment, he said, we got bested by 50. It's not just let it go. A lot of blank is not right, and you got to fix it, right? And this is not the first quote we've seen like this from Bridges, which is like high frustration, sort of down in the dumps. Early on it was like putting things on his shoulders when he was playing bad. Like he was like, and he clearly, was taking a lot of that to heart, right? Like to say, this is on me. I got to be better. If I'm going to play like this, we're going to lose. Like I'm, paraphrasing a lot of this stuff. We've seen a few more things lately that have kind of been digs at the organization when they sat the guys against the Bucks. He did not like that move. Like this quote here, which is like a little out of context, but not really. I just think like there's just, is there like more chance that he asks for a trade or more chance he resigns him? I don't know. I don't know if I would feel confident.
Let's close out on that. I think I would say in this moment right now, if you asked me, it's more likely that he would request a trade before he would re-sign with the Brooklyn Nets.
Crazy, man. Crazy. This is why you don't do this after a 50-point loss, by the way.
No.
I agree with you. Right. I agree with you. I'm saying the same thing. The same thing. I'm also admitting this is why you don't do this exercise after a 50-point loss. But
headed into the All-Star weekend, let's all just take away. Because, by the way, no risk of watching any Nets players over the All-Star weekend. But just to your point that when you lay out those things, I give us the best chance to win. I always want to be out there. So there's a little bit of contention around minutes, right? He's an Iron Man, plays every single game. You come over as the jewel of the Kevin Durant trade. I'm sure whatever he anticipated in the short term, it was not supposed to look like being 10 games under 500, right? And slogging your way through a first full season after 27 games a year ago. Hey, all right, a little under 500, but you could see some things building there. The hard part probably from a Mikal Bridges standpoint, and a lot of these core players, is that nothing feels, we thought learning a new system and everybody acclimating was a big part of what the Brooklyn Nets needed to accomplish from 27 games at the end of last season, then coming into this year. So now it's one of two things. And we've talked about Jacques Vaughn extensively. Either the players can't understand the system or the system is not good enough. And we tend to lean towards the latter, obviously. Coming up here in 1 second, I do want to turn my attention then to what does the short term for this team look like? And also some comments from you guys. We start a handful of them in here. Let's get to you all. You stuck around with us. It's now your opportunity to dive in on that part of the conversation. And we'll do that here coming up in just one moment. But did you know first that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right. No cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most of your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal information. We have investing involves risk and including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% match on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA is available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker dealer. And of course, as we wrap things up, start to turn our attention to the fans, your questions, and things that we want to talk about coming out of this game, and then maybe this big picture that we are kind of throwing in your direction. Just the last note there, Doug, before we get into the fans, that it would be something for whatever the issues were with Harden or Kyrie or KD. When that thing falls apart, you make the association of this is the price of superstars because they can be demanding and they can kind of take control of your organization while they're here. But if you get to the second tier players and those players start requesting trades and don't want to be a part of it, then you start to get a little bit of a different energy around your organization and franchise and the way they are perceived by players in the league.
Yeah, and like, I think I always feel like there's conversations being had, outside of what can be done, like sort of like NBA legally, right? There's tampering happens all the time. Like, it just is. These guys talk all the time. You can tamper easily through players, right? Like Bridges is a well-liked guy. They've made that.
Donovan Mitchell covering his mouth with a towel after the Cavs game, saying, "I'll see you when you come to Cleveland and play with me."
Yeah, they just like the friends. Like these guys can talk all the time. Like they kind of probably know sort of what the landscape is. I don't think that always means they're going to end up the places they want to be, right? Like a la Damian Lillard and Kyrie Irving, and like there's examples of really good players that don't end up in the places that like they chose first, right? Damian Lillard wanted to go to Miami. It seemed like Kyrie kind of wanted to go to LA, right? Now sometimes you get a Durant, he does go to Phoenix. I don't know. So it's like I think it's not for sure sort of like where they're gonna, or Harden goes to the Clippers, right? Like, so I think are cases where it does happen. There's cases where it doesn't. I think they probably have some sense of like the landscape of like who is coming out there. We've heard Trae Young could come, not to the Nets, but like he could be available, right? Like there's been constant rumblings of Mitchell. There's always just the player X who's just not available now, who gets unhappy with their current situation. LeBron James, I don't know. They're not going to do that, but like there's guys out there, and I think things happen. I do wonder though, if one, they feel very confident with this to like being overconfident with it because you can't control every piece of this landscape. Right. And two, if they ended up like miscalculating how much their current guys want to stay. I think that's like the biggest part. That's like the existential risk here. Right. The biggest risk might be that the call is coming in from inside the house. And like that part, when you read these Bridges quotes and see, like, that's the part that they might have messed up on, is that you can just suck for like 2 years and all of a sudden nobody wants to play there anymore. Like
the current crop of guys are just like, hey, not for me. Now I've ridden this thing to the bottom.
Bridges like, hey, I'm going to be 29. I'm not going to just restart this thing.
Yeah.
Like, and so I think that actually is could be the biggest potential risk. And I hadn't really thought about it too much before this conversation, but this is starting to hammer at home that I don't know, that like that stars might not want to come here if like the best players don't want to stay here either.
And by the way, because we've talked about this, right? You're always going to say what the Nets said publicly. There's no offer you could give us for Mikal Bridges. We're not trading him. We're not interested in trading him. Even same thing for second-tier guys like a Dorian Finney-Smith. You're like, we're not taking the offers. We want the equivalent of so much more than you'd ever be willing to give up. And that's all well and good. But the fact that the reality, if you're Mikal Bridges, that over these next 2 years, if the real star becomes available, well, guess what? You may be the most attractive piece we have, so we don't have to give up all of our draft picks. So we will trade you. Like there's right. The business of this thing. So to your point of the message from the Nets to Mikal being, you're the new face of this thing. Until we figure out what the next real phase of this organization is, that is a very hard thing, and also a narrative that you have to assume the player sees through to whatever degree.
And look, and real quick, things can change. Like things can also change quick, right? Like they could rip off. We know they're going through a soft part of the schedule soon. They could rip off a 15-9 stretch, and we're never talking about this again. Like, right? Like sports just has a way of self-leveling sometimes, but I think like when we're taking these Bridges quotes, like I want. That's why I'm so, like clearly saying he had this rough quote following this game. It's not the first one though, right? Like we're building a case here in a court of law, and we're going to be submitting evidence, not just from the 50-point loss against the Celtics. There's going to be exhibit A, B, C, D, E. Like there's going to be lots of things here. And I think that's where you that's the worry, right? Is that like, it's not the first thing.
And you and I have had these conversations to different degrees throughout the course of this season. But the one thing that I'll say too is, because I agree with you, we said, I believe they could go 6-4 over the 10 games, including the 2 Boston games and presuming them to be losses. I believe the Nets can get to 37 wins. They can sneak into the 10th seed and make the play-in tournament. What games like this remind me, or I think instill in me from a Nets perspective, and other situations like going 7-20 over stretches of the season, is that I still feel what we talked about at the top, that this is not going to be the core of players that are here in 2 years, that this is not going to be the head coach, that it could likely not be the GM, and there's a small chance it won't be the ownership. And that's regardless of having some moderate success, of going what I said would be 17-14 over their last 31 games, right? There is the short-term narrative where it's good and I want the team to be successful and achieve these goals. And then there's the big picture. And frankly, going 30, getting a 37 win season and making the 10th seed doesn't change the big picture. Getting the 8th seed, getting the 7th seed, right? Losing in the first round 4 games to 2 and taking a team to 6, right? That changes the narrative. And right now, that doesn't look any different, at least in this moment. And I don't think that would change even over another, 30 games, 29 games.
Totally agree. So anyway, headed to the All-Star break here. Enjoy the All-Star break, everybody.
Hey,
stick around. I know we
everybody
still
have
got
a
a lot
good
of people
time,
in YouTube. I've already started starring some questions, so do not disappear on YouTube. We're going to start getting answered some of these. We ran some double duty here on the podcast. Really appreciate everyone that jumped into YouTube, but don't worry, we're going to stick around here for even longer answering some of those questions. In the meantime, make sure that you go to wegotnets.com, grab that free ebook, 5 stories in 5 days. Leave a message in the contact form if there's something else you want to hear about. Really appreciate it. All the great feedback we got for the ebook. wegotnets.com.
Remember this, that very little is needed to make a happy life. Marcus Aurelius.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
One of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again after the All-Star break and in a moment on YouTube answering your questions with more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. We're totally fine. Basketball. Yeah. All right, don't worry. No fresh introduction. Right into the good times. Talking with you guys, the fans. As we always say, we do appreciate everyone being in here. Thanks for sticking
my hat on.
double duty. The hat goes on now. This is when you know the important part of the podcast. We've cut that one off. Now we get to the fun part, which is talking with you guys, and the hat goes on because Doug.
Good job by Adam picking up when my camera dropped out there. This little bit like Adam picked up. I mean, that's an absolute pro. I'm going to queue up some things here, but a pro's pro, getting in there, handling some reads. Seamless. You never even know what happened as my camera just decided to straight out just die. And it's probably going to die again because this.
I will say, by the way, too, since we're in the bonus, this has happened. Doug's had a couple of times with technical issues, but by and large, it's come back on, pretty quickly. It usually gets back into the fold.
Yeah.
So there was a lull there where I just kind of looked longingly into the Elgato and thought, no, Doug will be back. No, he's not coming back.
The Elgato, the cat's coming for you.
This cat's got claws, but not 9 lives. Oren, at least Mikhail Prokhorov knew when he messed up and handed the franchise off. I don't know if this time we'll be as lucky. Interesting note here, because in the background, Doug, make a comment. You can move on to the next question. I'm going to pull up what Prokhorov purchased the Nets for, and also we know what he sold them for, about $3.2 billion. So he does not really about making a mistake. It's about making money and just seeing when the franchise was worth more.
Yeah. Chip 7, I don't think anyone wants to come play for the team at this point. Again, it's never a great job, never a great idea to do macro planning of future things after a 50-point loss. That being said, like we've said before, we've always thought, even leading to the trade deadline, that sitting and waiting for a star just didn't feel to me or us like the right path, because it was going to rely on a lot of other things, sort of chips falling into place, dominoes, whatever analogy you want to use, mixing my metaphors there. But I think that I think we have to introduce the Mikal Bridges problem. I think that's a thing about the potential of risk there. I like this one because this is one of my favorite long time running NBA jokes. Adam and Doug, you got to cheer up the savior of the franchise. Maybe listening to this while finishing up his high school science fair project. High school, baby, middle school. This is why I love when this is when they just got traded for a 2030 first round pick. It's like 2030. That's 6th grade, baby. That's 6th, 7th grade. So high school science fair project. Forget about it. We're probably looking. They ever got back into the draft.
Okay,
we're talking 6th, 7th grade. But yeah, go ahead with the Prokhorov number.
Clear. This might not be the total figure because it says buying control of the New Jersey Nets. This is 2009 for less than $400 million.
Yeah.
2009, it's 2024.
He did fine.
And he sold it for 3.2 billion with a B. So it worked out. Turns out it wasn't about, oops a daisy, I made a mistake. It was, I made one of the best business decisions of my life. I'm going to retire back to Russia with my billions of dollars.
Yeah, he joined that Trace Commerce Club, like he rebillionized.
Re-up. Wow. Wouldn't you know it?
Little Russ Hanneman action, all right.
By the way, the other thing real quick, when you talked about nobody wants to come, that we didn't say that in the episode, that and then you'll just go get Donovan Mitchell. It's like, yeah, because he'll pick you. Like, it's going to be you that he picks out of all the teams possible, even if he wants East Coast, whatever. The Brooklyn Nets, with how they currently look, that's the gem in his eye, not 4 other teams in the Eastern Conference that play on the East Coast that are right now in the top 4 seeds of the conference.
Yeah, look, and it could happen. I don't know.
It certainly could. Kyrie
they have assets. They can trade. Like, they can make a trade. They could go out and spend a lot for a good player. It's not the covers aren't bare here. They have the scratch to be able to go do something. We've just long worried and wondered if it's going to be enough. That note, do you feel like Bridges, this is from Iceman, the a long time listener. Do you feel like Bridges doesn't like JV's system or certain things he does coaching, like the small ball and the other stuff he says? Well, I think he hates losing, right? Like, remember, he was on a Phoenix Suns team that went through different iterations of this, but they did go to the finals, right? Yep. And so, he's been to the finals here. And so going to the finals and then being 20 and 30 or whatever they are now is a pretty far way to drop, with maybe not a lot of feelings like you're going to get a lot better here in the next couple of years. And so that has to be a problem. In terms of the system, I mean, they don't really run a system. It's like they don't really run pick and roll. They run a spread offense, or spread as it can get, with like when Simmons and Claxton. They try to ISO beat their primary defenders into like spacing actions. Mm-hmm. They don't even run like tons of pin downs or anything like that. Like, they just don't really run much of a system. And so, besides just like Cam Thomas and Mikal Bridges, just try to cook the defender, and they try to space around it. Even with Simmons, they don't really run a system. They just try to get in transition a lot, which I agree with, by the way. I would do that also with Simmons, but they're not running a half court, a great crazy like half court action. They're running like DHOs where he doesn't look at the basket, and they try to set a screen, and he doesn't even like act as a roller a ton, even like he just, because like Claxton's sitting in the dunker spot. Like, it's not really much of a system.
And this is where a little bit of my confidence in the organization is starting to erode around the idea of, I don't know what moves you could have or should have made, but just not even about getting elite level players. It's like getting Schroeder in the door where you go, oh, okay, he can handle the ball, right? He can move at pace. You need more of that on the team. Sometimes just making margin moves like that so that Mikal Bridges gets further and further down the pecking order of needing to be an on-ball creator and can just play off of, as you mentioned, going back to the Suns days and what that role looked like. Those are the types of things I probably would have liked to have seen the Nets made. Not seismic ones, not costing you tons of picks, but just restructure it. Because again, these are all parts that you got from these superstar trades. You could sell the idea that, hey, this was just what we got back. It doesn't mean it's the perfect version of our roster. And it feels like they were somewhat complacent around the decisions that they needed to make. Here's Con. Do you guys believe the second apron in the CBA makes it more likely players are going to be traded because of the financial and draft pick pressure? It does change things, at least. I mean, we've already seen this. Like, teams want, by the way, the Nets are doing that, right? They're trying to do that right now. They're trying to avoid these aprons. They don't want the repeater tax that's going to carry over multiple years. That's specifically one thing that Josiah wanted to avoid this year, so it doesn't impact them the following offseason if you want to land a big star. So, yes, but I wonder how it impacts the way they look at contracts for superstars and how they get structured, because they're going to be then impossible to move based on the way the new CBA is punitive in those punishments.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen it too much. We haven't seen like a fire sale yet around these like apron teams, just because it's so new. So I'm not actually sure what the fire sale is going to look like. And I think with the second apron team, you can't aggregate salary out, but you might be able to aggregate salary in. I have to check that. Like, because I think when you're a second apron team and you want to make a trade, like if you've been in there, you're a repeater, whatever, you can't send out like 3 $10 million contracts for a $30 million guy. I'm pretty sure it's got to be like a 1-to-1 money swap, but I'm not sure if it can't go the other way. I'm not sure if like you could send out 30 million for 3 $10 millions. right? Like, I'm not sure if the aggregation,
right.
I'm not sure. I have to look that up actually, because I'm not sure if the aggregation works in reverse. It's for sure coming in, you cannot aggregate, right? Because what they're trying to do is like make it so that you can't keep like trading for stars, basically.
Right.
Like that's what the reason they want to do it. But we haven't
always a
seen
good time to be a franchise with a stockpile of draft assets.
Yeah, but you can't. But I haven't seen what it looks like. We haven't seen what it looks like when one of these teams fails yet, and then just starts to unload everything, because so many teams are just sort of sticking with what they are. So this is a wait and see one for me. It's a good question. I don't have thought about the full answer.
This is a good one here. Sean Marks and his second round picks aren't going to save us. Chippy, you're on fire tonight, buddy. When you're rolling, you're rolling. I think keep taking your shots. This one, Thomas or Bridges, who would you build this team around? I'm going to say that this sounds obvious, that if you had to pick out one of the two, it's going to be Thomas. He's 4 years younger and he's a microwave scorer and he can do more on the ball than Mikal Bridges can. And just for all those reasons, like Mikal Bridges, for whatever he is proven that what he's not is a potential superstar. Cam Thomas is still untapped potential, even if he can't guard a wet cold.
I'm not sure I would build around either.
No, again, if I had to pick one of them, picking Thomas.
Oh, if I had to pick one,
I had my choice of option C, trade these guys for valuable assets, and then find the right guy to build.
I have a bad feeling that we're gonna look back if it was true that Houston offered everything back, and I'm not sure that's true, right? But if we ever found out,
by the way, just quick, the way that was framed was that Houston was willing to offer several of Brooklyn's original picks back. So it didn't say all. So 3, right? Maybe the swaps back. Maybe they were willing to give up the 2024, which is supposed to be a weaker class, not the future one. But let's say that they're willing to give up 3 of their pick controls back. That was the the speculation.
Well, I'll hold my comment on that one then. So never mind. I would choose Thomas because he's younger.
What if they were going to give all the picks back?
I mean, Bridges, I think, is a better all-around player. So, like, I don't know. It's harder. That's a hard one. I'm not sure. I think it's mostly like these aren't franchise cornerstone guys. That's the problem, right? Like, neither of these guys are franchise cornerstone problems. So, or franchise cornerstone guys. I think Thomas has the potential to be like, but like, what's Thomas's ceiling, right? Like, is it like Donovan Mitchell? I'm not sure, right? I'm trying to like think about like what his like ultimate ceiling, absolute ceiling is. I actually don't think it's Mitchell, but let's just say that like that's who it is. That he's great. Mitchell's great. So maybe that's, I don't know. I'm waffling a little bit here, but like, it's hard. It's hard to have a small guard, a small score first guard be your best player. Like, unless you're Steph.
Not that, again, we're throwing names around. It's like the Dame Lillard version of this, where like he's basically a pure offensive
but he's not as good as Dame. Like, he's no.
I'm not saying he is not as good as Mitchell.
I know,
either, but Mitchell had like the defensive pedigree in his background, and we've seen him kind of dial that up when it matters. But Dame is like, he's a pure offensive player, right? He's going to give you scoring, and then we saw what Portland was able to do in a couple of years there when back when they had McCollum there with him, right? But like if that's the ceiling of Thomas, he's not anywhere near there yet. But if that's the ceiling of him, and you and I have said this about guards, then your guard can't be your best player. So who's?
By the way, these are great players, so it's like fine to be in these conversations. Right. And if you had Dame Lillard on your team, you would take it. I actually don't even think his ceiling is these guys. I mean, there were like listed like 2 guys who were like, Dame's a Hall of Famer for sure, right? And like, yeah, I just don't know. I don't want to. It's coming off sounding like anti-Cam. It's really not, but
pro Cam. Ian, what coaches are available now and who might be available at the end of the season? Everybody, anybody. I don't know. Coaches come available all the time. I don't have not.
I mean, like Rivers was sitting there. He kind of snaked his way into Milwaukee. The best part of that story,
Jeff Van Gundy, Mark Jackson.
No, but the best part about the Rivers story was where he was a consultant for the team, and then he ends up being the coach. Is like, that's so like whatever. I don't know. It's so.
I don't think this coach is doing a good job right now.
Yeah. So but like that that coaching pool, you'd be hiring, assistants, guys who are, lead assistants on our teams. Right. Like, and everyone always wants to, run down like the Mark Jackson, Jeff Van Gundy, and these guys have a coach forever. Like, I don't know why anyone wants these guys to be the coach. Not like anyone's saying this.
There's not as much of like in the NFL, coaches rise up or like coordinators rise up in a certain way. The NBA, at least perceptually to me, it's like the guys that get entrenched, they get entrenched. It is 20, 30 year lifer coaches. I mean, Doc Rivers, the fact that Doc Rivers walked back in to a championship aspiring team as their head coach. He has a track record, but it's just mind boggling that like that the pool is always the pool. And it seems like they'll go through the retreads well before they'll go in like a new direction or take a risk.
Well, I mean, there
on a
are
different-
guys who have emerged, right? Like over the last couple of years, like Will Hardy's a great coach.
Mhm.
Dagnall's a great coach. People kind of go back and forth on Missoula, but he kind of ended up with the job. Like there are guys that come out and end up being really good. It's just a lot of these guys are like, you kind of have to follow teams to sort of know who's running schemes. Like Ime was like this, honestly. Like Ime Udoka was like a guy like this, was a much sought after guy. Obviously screwed up in Boston. Clearly the Nets wanted to hire him. They got pushback from inside the organization. So he was hired. Yep. And they got pushback from either inside the organization for sure, almost, and maybe the NBA too.
Yeah.
Right. And they didn't do it. And that might end up looking like a mistake, and because the Rockets did it. Now the Rockets haven't been amazing here, but I think most people would agree that Ime is a better coach than Jacques Vaughn. Sure. So, right, these guys like do come free, but it's just like they're not going to be names that might jump off the paper. But the guys, like, you don't have to be a lifer coach to end up being a good coach. There's plenty of guys out there that are coaching teams now that were assistant coaches somewhere else.
And Jacques Vaughn learned with the Spurs and learned under Popovich, right? I mean, he's been a lifer coach, and it just, for whatever reason, does not translate to scheme. And the Nets have had this bad run now with back-to-back coaches. It doesn't translate to schemes. And then, of course, Steve Nash wasn't a lifer coach. He was just a fun guy to have on the sidelines. But just a quick note, Con, I noted about CBA. So he's a good question that like we'll follow up on. And then same thing for you, Ian. Like I'll start to come up with a little bit of a short list of guys that maybe you want to be watching or paying attention to over the back end of this season.
If you ever want to have your comments brought up,
this is always the way. The way into Doug's heart is just tell him you agree with him. He doesn't even remember what he said, but knowing that you agree with him just really warms his soul. Last but not least here, we've got hitting. Vaughn will get fired 100%. His record since December has been horrible. Yeah. I mean, listen, the other, we talk about them going 17-14 overall and 37 wins. That's about where they're predicted to go at. I don't think he gets fired necessarily after this season if they were to do that. If they go the other way and they finish with 33 wins, 32 wins, 30 wins, then I think you could see the move, just because at a certain point, how can you defend what the record is if organizationally you believe in the talent? There has to be something's failing somewhere. Either the coach is failing or the players are failing. Something's going to have to come to a head there in that regard.
I don't think he's going to be the coach next season. I think he's going to, like I said, we said this many times. My bet is, if I had to make a bet right now, it said he coaches the rest of the season and is not brought back. That's what I think is good. That's what I think is going to happen. That just makes the most
hard to argue against. Yeah.
I don't know. Do you see anything else here? I know we stuck around here for a little bit. There's someone he brought up. This is a good point. I know it's at you, but that's what we talk about. But Nick Nurse was another good example of this, right? Of a guy who was. You know what?
It's kind of funny because now he's been around so long that I put him in now into the lifer category because of a long run with Toronto and then moved.
And someone else mentioned Dagnall, but I said Dagnall too. Like I used that in the list of guys who were just part of other organizations and kind of emerged and became like really good coaches. I will say this, being an NBA coach is hard. Like, it's hard. I know everyone wants to fire everybody and everyone always thinks they would do a better job. And it's all just about calling a timeout at the right time. And that's all you have to do to be a coach. Like, that's not it. Like, being an NBA coach is very difficult. It's multi-layered management of a lot of egos, a lot of guys who want to play, a lot of different guys who are trying to fit into a system, sometimes like ill-fitting rosters. It's hard. Like, not everyone can do this. And this is not a letting Jacques Vaughn off the hook. I think like he had a track record of not really being a floor raiser here. So maybe that's the problem with hiring him. I think he's a good guy and I think he's thoughtful, but I don't think he's it doesn't seem like a great coach. But everyone that wants to be like, hey, coaching is easy. It's just not. It's not. Like, you're managing. It's not just system either. It's ego management, player management, ego in a good way, by the way. These guys have to have egos. You don't get to the NBA without an ego. Like, you have to believe you're the best, right? So like all these things you have to manage. And then the X's and O's piece of it, which is also a very difficult thing. It's just hard. I know everyone wants to say they can do it. The answer is you'd almost definitely can't.
Well, Sorry, I just wanted to say that, yeah, Ollie is well regarded. He's on the staff. Doug has reiterated time and again about this is why you don't fire Jacques Vaughn, because you put the next coach in a bad spot. Burrell, who coached the G League and got promoted up to the NBA level. Because the last note I was going to make on this is one of the areas, whatever your perspective on Sean Marks is, this might be the area you say that this is his biggest failing. Now, whether it's acquiescing to superstars, whether he actually had the guy in Kenny Atkinson, but he moved on from him. And then it was Steve Nash, and that was a disaster. Now it's Jacques Vaughn. That's not working. So one of his biggest areas of with a lack of success could be identifying the right coach for superstars or otherwise. So maybe it's Ollie, maybe they believe in Burrell too, coming up from the G League, and that that would represent an organizational development of a coach and going outside the old pool. But we're not going to know that in the short term anyway. And I don't know how much they suffer being on the Jacques Vaughn staff. If they continue to not be successful, they are in charge of different factions of the offense and defensive system. So it can't just be that Jacques Vaughn, he's the only one. He's designing every play. He's calling every shot. I know it's going to stop with him, but this coaching staff is also failing in totality.
Yeah, look, we'll look back at this. The Nets have like infinity sliding door moments with this organization over the last 3 years, 4 years, with just like, kind of everything that could have gone wrong has gone wrong in this time frame, like to an unbelievable degree. But that Ime one is a huge one. Again, he was hired. Like they announced it basically. Yeah. Like they now, I remember where I was. I can remember exactly where I was too. I was sitting in we were just about to leave Mexico and come back to the States, and I was sitting in like an Airbnb, and I was thinking, oh man, this is crazy. Like this is like the one landing spot where they can hire a guy, like the guy who's kind of not gonna be able to find a place anywhere else, who has like massive pedigree.
Yep.
And maybe save the Durant Irving situation, and they didn't do it. So because he was coming off a high profile problematic thing in Boston. Like he dug a mini grave there with his actions. Houston didn't have a problem with doing it though. Like the Nets, it was funny because like the Nets took the first PR hit, and he kind of got like punished by not getting that job. And that was kind of like the punishment. And then he got hired.
Yep.
Like he needed to get hired and then rejected as the punishment. And that it's like, hey, there's real consequences. You don't get the job. Look at that. We got, you know what I mean? And then the next team got him. And it's just so crazy. It's just so crazy that it happened that way.
Anything else you want to get?
No, man. Well, look, hour and 30 or hour and 15 into this. I think we did it. I was just scrolling real quick to see if there's anything else to bring up that we hadn't talked about. Okay. WeGotNets.com. Go grab that free ebook. Much appreciated. Hey, look, it's not a lot. You get hundreds of people into a YouTube after a 50-point loss. But, baby, these are Nets light. Your Nets lifers out there. And if you are grinding on the Nets like we are every single night, then you got to go to WeGotNets.com. Grab some of the stuff. All free, by the way. Everyone likes something free. Just go to WeGotNets.com. It's free. Get the free ebook. You see the podcast and stuff up there. You leave a note in the contact form. Let us know the stories you want to tell. WeGotNets.com.
Everyone has talent. What's rare is the courage to follow it to the dark places where it leads. Erica Zhang.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again next week after the All-Star break, talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball.